when he came out of playing basketball, and I saw genetics galore. I mean, I don't know if anyone, I think he may have better genetics than necessarily Ronnie Coleman.
All right, I have with me today Jay Cutler, 4 times Mr. Olympia champion. Everyone knows who this guy doesn't really need an introduction. And we're talking all about bodybuilding contests, but we're talking about everything today. So really stay tuned for this. I'm excited. So how are you feeling right now?
Everything is spectacular, man. I'm glad we were able to link up. I know we kind of went back and forth, and it's great that our schedules kind of we're able to meet up. And I've been aware of your stuff for quite some time, and whether it's controversial or not, man, it's always good, right?
Absolutely. And we're almost the same age. I'm 46, you're 48. We've been bodybuilding for a long time. Obviously, I'm not as successful, but I'm still here. And, I'm kind of half retired, whatever, doing healthy things, hopefully. And so I wanted to know this question. Do you think that you can be a bodybuilder and have balance? Because, I mean, the diet, the supplements, everything, and having to stay on a certain regimen for so long, can you actually have balance? Is it actually possible, or is it just not?
You can, but I think at a certain level, that's going to be a little bit restricted, especially when you become, like I did, a top IFBB professional, and traveling, and, you become the business, and, you're trying to run merchandising, and you're pretty much 24/7. Not to say that you can't have a day off on, I only trained 5 total days in a week's time, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But, my days off were focused on still working to, tune my body, whether it was massage therapy, running errands, that focused all around the business. And remember, it was very limited because when I was competing, for, 2 major contests a year, plus some maybe filler shows in between, you're on a diet for 35 plus weeks out of a 52-week year. So it was very difficult to step aside and say, okay, I'm not going to eat my 6 or 7 meals a day and do my cardio during the day and train. Most of my career was twice a day. You don't have a lot of capability to step out of that realm of being the great one, right? And I think that's where there's a little confusion. But at an amateur level, yes. I mean, I think people, if you're doing a real job or you're going to school or, you're involved in other activities, it's definitely, I consider anyone that lifts weights a bodybuilder, right? I think
Sure.
I would say anyone that tries to look and try to build a better physique is considered a bodybuilder. So it's kind of a broad term, but I think at the top tier level, someone in my position, I think it's very difficult to have the balance. And obviously that strains a lot of relationships, a lot of friendships, business relationships. As I mean, you've heard the horror stories of sometimes dealing with top tier bodybuilders. Like you just might not get the production that you might from someone that's doing it more as a hobby.
And for me, I always felt I could have balance. It wasn't easy, but I always had that balance. Well, like for you, yourself personally, not other people. Could you go out with your friends? Could you get drunk every now and then? Could you go out to a restaurant? Could you hang out? Could you go to the movies, or was the smell of butter like, no, I can't do it? I mean, how was it for you?
I had the willpower of Superman. So I was I was on point. I remember I started this thing at 18, and I started with a diet on my refrigerator. I had 6 meals a day, and I followed it to a T. I never switched up the schedule at all. Like I never switched up, meal 2 with meal 4. I ate the same foods at the same time every day, and I monitored the results. And the training was the same exact way. I never missed. And I would still go out and do I would go to the movies, go to dinner. I'd order plain chicken breast, baked potato. I would choose the restaurants. Even to this day, I still choose certain menus that allow me to be a little restrictive with my nutrition, because I'm still following some sort of a guide, not necessarily on the 6 meals a day, but I still eat clean. But you are very limited. Like I used to ride ATVs a lot. I know we were talking about the whole thing with the virtual stuff you were doing, but I just, I didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of other things. And maybe that's just me. I put a lot of pressure on myself. But the movies were easy dinners, but going out and getting drunk, man, I live in Vegas, and there wasn't many of those nights that I went out and partied. But not to say I never did. In the holidays, we'd have people over or whatever. It was, there was always some fun to it, but it was always around more focused on, okay, how can I get up and train the next day? And how can I commit to what I'm trying to do on a daily basis with the food and the sleep patterns?
Sounds like if you're just conscious of what you're doing, you're being conscientious, you're going out to eat, but you chose the right restaurant. You can go there and have the salad chicken. You can hang out with your friends. You limit your alcohol. I mean, I'll drink Coors Light. I just won't drink as many of them. So you can do these things. It's just, I think people get so blindsided by having to win a show that they can't realize that there's more to life that just doing this 16 weeks of prep, that you're allowed to go to a movie theater on Friday and you're allowed to have like a popcorn and it's not going to ruin your physique. I just don't think people realize that.
Yeah. And, for me, remember, Greg, I started at 18 and I became great. I was a teenage national champion at 19 and I turned pro at 23. So I know you started later, right? So you had already a systematic approach on how you lived your life where, man, I only knew egg whites and oatmeal for breakfast, like from 18 forward. Like I still eat the same breakfast every day. So I really didn't have an opportunity to live those party nights. And not to say that, listen, if I started later, maybe my life would have been different. And that would have just been habitual that I fell into doing more outside activities. But for me, it was just like, I had this tunnel vision. I was very robotic with what I did. And, but it is possible. It is possible. But when you start so early, you just stay with the system that had you the greatest success. Right. So that's how I approached everything. And, I got a knock on it sometimes, but I mean, it definitely built a successful career for me.
And you mentioned me starting later. I think perhaps I actually started training at 10 and I was competing in high school. I just never got really good at it till I was later. I did natural shows for the first 42 before switching over to the extra PEDs. And so I always had balance because I was like, I'm not going to be a pro. I had no ambitions. I never looked that great. I mean, I was okay, but it wasn't until I started taking PEDs that I got to the next level. I wanted to be a pro. And then I pursued it as much as I could. I did everything I could to be a top pro, but I just didn't have the genetics to get that far. And so, I think that made it a little bit easier for me.
Yeah. I mean, I got interest when I was 12 years old, but I didn't even start training until I was 18. I mean, I toyed with a little bit of bench press and whatever in high school for football, but for me, I don't know. I didn't have limitations really. Once I started, it was like all in. So I think everyone's individual with what they choose, and everyone has their different methods. But I definitely listen. I've been living my life since 40. I'm 48 now, and I mean I've lived a lifetime between 40 and 48 that I feel I missed on those early years. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of genetics, you're saying you only started lifting at 18, yet you're national champion at 19 and pro at 23. And I think I saw you benched 500 and deadlift or squatted 700 around the age of 19.
When I was 19, yeah, I had crazy legs and crazy strength. Even in high school, I was squatting like 400 pounds, just not even working out. Like I would go to these competitions for football and I was the best bench presser, deadlifter, squatter there was. I mean, even in our region, I benched more than most of the kids and I had a great physique, and I grew up doing concrete. My family business is concrete. So I started doing that at 11. So I had a rugged physique. That's why I was great at football. I was a defensive tackle, fullback. I had a lot of speed and strength, but I also had some rugged size to me and lean body mass. So for me, when I started training, it was like, it wasn't just bulking up and putting on body fat. It was, keeping lean and adding, bigger arms, bigger legs. And then the strength, of course, came with it too.
And this reminds me of this question I want to ask, like, how important do you think genetics are? Because I mean, without question, your genetics are ridiculous, obviously combined with the hard work to get to that pro level and to actually win an Olympia. But could an average person with like average genetics or even below, could they like outwork that? Could they become an IFBB pro, like on an open stage, even with average genetics, or you got to be blessed to start with and put in the work? What do you think of that?
I think your structure will limit how far you can go, meaning like your height to shoulder ratio. But you look at someone like a Dexter Jackson, who, he started as a bantamweight. So who would have thought he would have become a Mr. Olympia? Or someone like Phil Heath, who I saw, when he came out of playing basketball, and I saw genetics galore. I mean, I don't know if I think he may have better genetics than necessarily Ronnie Coleman as far as muscle bellies and what it takes to really attain that. But then, someone like Ronnie, who turned pro natural and competed in his first Olympia natural, I mean, that's genetics, right? So it's questionable. Everyone has different views on genetics. I mean, I'm a wide-waisted guy. So would you really consider that great genetics? I mean, I had kind of wider hips, so I had to offset that with the larger shoulders. And if you looked at me when I first started, I mean, I looked good, but to think I would have been, the greatest bodybuilder in the world at some point, I was like yourself. When I started, I never looked at myself being in, Dorian Yates's shoes, who was Mr. Olympia at the time. I'm like, there's no way I'll ever look like that. And sooner or later, here I was that guy. And, I look back and say, right away, I mean, Chris Aceto said, this guy's got great genes, but I don't think he ever thought I would be as great. We linked up about 6 months after I started training and, where I started working on nutrition. So I had the right guidance, but I mean, if you went back and asked him, I mean, he would say, yes, I knew it when he was 19 and won the teen nationals that he would be great.
I think with genetics, there's certain different categories. You have your genetics for being really, really lean. Some guys, it's just a struggle to get to 5%, 4% to compete. It's just impossible. Other people, they have amazing genetics for putting on size. Others have that small waist, the wide shoulders, kind of like the Chris Bumsteads, just the great genetics for structure. And so depending on how much you have of one and how much you have another, it's going to ultimately determine how far you can go. But for certain, your genetics for strength and size, that had to be just your strongest features.
Yeah. My strongest feature, honestly, Greg, was my mindset. I was working before school, after school, school vacations, a family business. We never had a clock, right? So it was like sun up to sundown. And I hated my family for it. My brothers and my father would drag me out at 6 a.m. And, listen, I was a kid partying in high school, doing all the things that we do. And, I was pretty popular early on. So even when I was a freshman and sophomore, I was out on the weekends late and I would have to go to work on Saturdays and Sundays. And man, I was out, drinking the night before or having a good time. And, my dad would be at my bedside, like, get out of bed, you're coming to work. And I'm like, man, I just got in like 2 hours ago. And I didn't realize how much that would give me like the ability to push myself beyond what I consider great genetics. Like there's guys that we look at Flex Wheeler or all these guys that have great genes, but I felt I could outwork a lot of guys because of my work ethic. And that stemmed from the early childhood things with my work schedule and what my family demanded from me. So I feel that it's mind over matter. You hear those things, but who's going to push themselves when no one's looking in the gym or at 5 o'clock in the morning when I was working on a golf course when I was doing the teenage nationals. I had to get up at 3 and ride the bike. But Chris Aceto told me, hey, you need to get your cardio and fasted. And I didn't know anything. I mean, that's a good question, is like people still ask, is it necessary to do fasted cardio, right? It just worked. Chris liked it. So that's what I did. And that's what I learned. And that's what I preach today to all the people that I help, is fasted cardio worked best for me. And, that's where I outworked everyone and kind of brought my genetics to another level, if that makes sense.
Well, I really love what you brought up, saying the mind is like a genetic base, because it's so true. Like I really, truly feel that you're born with this instinct to be able to push yourself harder than other people. I've been in every sport. I was a phys ed teacher, coached every sport. And I could see some children that just would come in and they could just work. They could just push hard. I didn't have to yell at them. I didn't have to encourage. They just wanted it really bad. And the people that really want it are going to go far. Bodybuilding, I think, is probably one of the sports in the world that you need the greatest mindset. You need to be able to push yourself, because you're doing both strength training, you're going to the gym, doing cardio and the diet. And it's a 365 thing. You can't just say, well, here's my off season, I'm just going to not train and not. It's something that dedicates you all the time. So I really believe that mindset is so paramount.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think a lot of the greats that reach Olympia status, remember, they can cut out all the bullshit and just basically focus on what task is at hand and do it over and over and over. And I feel like, that's sometimes not spoken about as much as looking at someone's physique or their physical ability rather than their mind.
I want to bring this up. Regan Grimes, you're familiar with him. I know him. He's got, in my opinion, great genetics, great structure, great looking muscle. What do you think he needs to do to get to the next level? Like, he's already made the Olympia a couple of times. What would he need to do to go from, say, out of the top 10 into potentially a top 5? Would it be a change in training, a change in mindset? Does he just need to diet hard? Is there any advice that you would give him if you were his coach specifically?
I would.
Next time on Coach Greg.
I don't think anyone should bulk because I don't think anyone should look like they're out of shape. I really knew in 06 I was going to beat him. When I won, I actually felt bad. They're going to say he's lying. I have no reason to lie. I just remember you screaming more on your videos, and your hair was like,
yeah,
I think you have crazy hair, right?